Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my friend, our mayor, Mayor Darrell Steinberg, back to the stage.
Thank you. Wow, Cassandra, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I can remember that night as well, some 27 years ago now. I remember it was Vallecito's Way in Glen Elder. I remember you, I remember the late Mary Brill. I remember all of us marching together, and that was the start of a very important chapter of my public service and of our city. I want to thank you for emceeing today's event and for your outstanding leadership heading the Greater Sacramento Urban League. You've been it for the long haul, just like I have, and I'm very appreciative of you and that you agreed to emcee this today. Thank you to all of my city council colleagues who are here: Angelique Ashby, Alan Warren, Jeff Harris, Steve Hansen, Eric Guetta, Jay Chenier, Rick Jennings, and Larry Carr. We are a team. I say it often. I do nothing alone. We are building this city together with the community in good times and bad. I'm privileged to serve with you. To all of the other elected officials and appointed officials who are here, the assembly member and school board members and county supervisor and Ambassador Ferrer and school board president Ryan and all of the other officials, and Jorge Aguilar is here, I see, our superintendent of public instruction in Sacramento, and of course to the city manager. This is a bicameral city, if you will, in a very different way. And it takes a partnership to do what we are doing. And Howard, you, not just you, but your entire team, the chiefs, Chief Hahn, Chief Loge, all your department heads, everyone who works for the city, I want to thank you for being here today and for your partnership. And I want to introduce the love of my life, 27 years, been through every chapter of public service with me and is still hanging with me, if you can believe that. Cantor Julie Steinberg, thank you for being here today. I love you. And most important, to our community, thank you for being here today. I remember in my early days on the city council in the 1990s, watching Sam and later Bonnie Pannell fight for their district, and in particular for Meadowview. In their own unique ways, they insisted that our city cannot, must not, have some neighborhoods with all the amenities and opportunities, and other neighborhoods with virtually nothing. Watching their efforts and the creation of what is now known as the Pannell Community Center was for me an early and tangible example of what happens when city government and community leadership combine forces to inject hope into forgotten neighborhoods. Last year, I delivered my annual State of the City address at the Memorial Auditorium and hosted the sponsors' breakfast at Luca. It was a great experience. I had the chance to explain why inclusive or neighborhood-based economic development must be our city's priority. It was the beginning of our ultimately successful Measure U campaign. This year, I chose the Pannell Community Center in Meadowview. The sponsors' breakfast finished just a few moments ago at the IHOP down the street. The food and company were great. This is the first State of the City address in recent memory outside the downtown core. The choice is intentional. There is no important venue to hold this year's State of the City address than Meadowview. For even if Meadowview and our entire city had not lived through the profound events of the past year, I know I would have chosen one of Sacramento's great neighborhoods for this annual rite. What I speak about today is not just about Meadowview, but all the Sacramento neighborhoods that rightfully demand our attention. I love the downtown, but the core of the city is broader than downtown. The core of our city is not just about geography. It's about people, and it's about values. There is strength everywhere in our city. The view from Mack Road, Del Paso Boulevard, Northgate Boulevard, and Marina Vista Alder Grove is as important as the view from J Street. And the life chances of a third grader growing up in one zip code should be no less than those of a third grader growing up in another. Traditionally, this speech is an opportunity to lay out all the great achievements in our city and many more to be accomplished. The truth is, there are many things to celebrate about the last year and the arc of our changing Sacramento. You know what they are, and we fought hard to achieve them. Thank you for those victories. But this would not be an honest speech about the state of our city if we did not today, in this place, at this moment, talk about race, peace, justice, and the death of Stephon Clark. The shooting of Stephon Clark, less than a mile from where we gather this morning, did not create this moment, but it undoubtedly intensified and elevated the movement by ripping open deep wounds in our past. How do I, as your mayor, give voice to the pain that is so real and so raw in our community? How do I, as a relatively privileged white man, let my suffering community members know that they do not suffer alone, that their elected leaders are genuinely committed to change? How do I step into your shoes? I start by saying and meaning the only thing that I know matters to Stephon's family and many in our community. I am deeply sorry for what happened to Stephon. I am deeply sorry for the pain that will always be with you. The outcome was wrong. He should not have died. I struggle with the right words and how to speak to the entire community. I listen to Stephon's family and the community say that this has happened too many times, and they are right. Undeniable fact. Even when our young African-American men don't die, their mothers and grandmothers and aunts and friends often fear for their lives when they walk out the door. Undeniable fact. Too many law-abiding young African-American men experience many of their interactions with law enforcement in hostile and negative ways. Undeniable fact. Many African-American parents do in fact teach their 16-year-olds to hold the 10-2 steering wheel position when they are pulled over. Show your hands. I never would have thought to mention such a thing to my kids when they learn to drive. I do not intend to make what I say next some political balancing of the scales or attempt at moral equivalence. Our police officers put their own lives on the line. They and their families live each day with the fear of not knowing whether they will come home alive. They confront real crime. They protect our neighborhoods from gangs and robberies and home break-ins and help people who are having a hard time with addiction, mental illness, and simply surviving. I have seen it. At the same time, the vast majority of our young people in Sacramento are working hard and are doing the right thing. Yet some younger people of all races act irresponsibly and disrespect themselves and their communities. That's true too. I can sit down with a justifiably traumatized African-American mother and a young police officer an hour apart, telling their side of the historic divide, and my head spins. One's experience does not invalidate the other's. Who is right? What is right? Can't we find better ways to listen, to protect, to help each other heal? I do not know what the district attorney and the attorney general will decide over the days, weeks, or months ahead. If they decide not to bring criminal charges based on the existing state law, I know there will be real anger about such a result. And so, what is the state of our city's relationship between our men and women in uniform and the communities, especially the communities of color, that they are sworn to serve? We are fortunate to have a great police chief, Daniel Hahn, sitting in the second row. Who was born and raised here in Sacramento. We are fortunate to have a chief and department that are leaning in and are well ahead of other cities in becoming more transparent and changing policies and protocols. We mandate body cameras. We release video of many incidents immediately. And we mandate that foot pursuit be a last resort, not the preferred police practice. We have opened ourselves up to a full review by the state attorney general. That is leadership. Our department is also actively pursuing a transformational policing model for our city. Over the past month, 100 officers and community members came together to take a hard look at the roots of distrust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Participants spent 2 days sharing their experiences to better understand how we might overcome these issues. It is a start. But our work in some ways has only just begun. The Attorney General and our own Office of Public Safety Accountability have told us clearly that while our use of force policy may meet strict legal requirements, there is much more we must do to bring clarity and safety to meet the spirit of the law and of our city's values. We must place more emphasis on the sanctity of life. And we must ensure our police response is not disproportionate to the suspected crime. The Attorney General said our police officers must see themselves as guardians of our neighborhoods, not as enforcers. How will people react on that day, knowing that our department is miles ahead of neighboring law enforcement agencies, but still far from where we need to go? I hope and pray and work for peace and nonviolence. We have all been working hard these last months, and especially the last weeks, to think, to organize, and to prepare for all possible outcomes. Mostly what we have been doing, however, is listening. Listening to the pain, to the frustration, and to the wisdom of our community. Your message is right and clear. To focus on peace without addressing justice would be a grave mistake. To try to contain the community's anger would be a worse mistake. Nonviolence does not mean inaction. Peaceful protest is not a problem to handle, but a right to embrace. We do not need to contain. We must instead lead. The best chance we have for peace is for people to know and see that we mean to change what must change. The truth of modern-day police officers is that they both put their lives at risk and they have an awesome power to take lives. As a community and as a country, we have an obligation to insist that this awesome power be tempered with wisdom, justice, and humility. Where that power is exercised fairly, the officers who serve selflessly and humbly every day must be lifted up and celebrated. Where they exercise that power harshly or unfairly, we must hold them and ourselves accountable. Where state laws must change to reflect the difference, I strongly support changing those laws. The long-held constitutional standard that allows officers to shoot when objectively reasonable must shift to a clear set of specific rules and standards that require officers to do all they can to prevent a potentially lethal confrontation in the first place. Our city must push to the front of the nation on transformative community policing, restorative justice, continued transparency, and accountability for all we do. There is no turning back. The old days are over. Yet, if we stop at the intersection of law enforcement and our community, especially our communities of color, we are stopping too soon. The evidence of generations of trauma and systemic poverty is beyond dispute. The hope, opportunity, and opening for healing and generational change is right in front of us. Let us step into the breach together. The police issues are rightfully magnified because officers have the legal authority to take a life. But our challenge today is not just what to do as a police department or a city to address the lessons of Stephon Clark, but more profoundly, what do we as human beings do to change ourselves and our ways? When marchers took to downtown streets a year ago to protest the death of Stephon Clark, they were walking through the old West End, a neighborhood that in 1950 housed 70% of the city's minority population. Right around the same time, the West End was labeled blighted and demolished to make room for I-5 and state office buildings. And why was it blighted? Because the Federal Housing Administration refused to underwrite mortgages to non-white borrowers, saying they were a threat to property values. There weren't a whole lot of other choices when it came time to move. Racially restrictive covenants barred non-whites from neighborhoods like Curtis Park and East Sacramento. Instead, they went to neighborhoods like Oak Park, Meadowview, and Del Paso Heights, which didn't have such restrictions. The late, great Nathaniel Colley, Sacramento's first African-American lawyer, passed on his experience of what it took for an African-American family to buy a home in segregated Southland Park in the 1950s. His son, Nat Jr., told a B reporter that white friends of the Colley family agreed to act as the actual purchasers for the Colleys, since no one would sell to them directly. When my mom would check on construction, Nat Jr. said, she would let them think she was the maid. After we moved in, there was a cross burning on the lawn, but it was a fairly quiet experience after that. The Colleys' experience was anything but remarkable or unique. It was, in fact, common. This is not just Black history. This is our history. our shared history. We must acknowledge the past and learn from it so we can avoid repeating it. Sacramento lives with these historic wrongs today. Inequities have persisted in many forms over the past half-century. In the mid-2000s, subprime lenders aggressively targeted minority homeowners with high-interest loans, even if they could have qualified for lower rates. When the recession hit, thousands of our people lost their homes. The percentage of African American families who own their homes in Sacramento County was cut in half and now stands at about 25%, the lowest rate in a century. Today in Sacramento, our communities of color are starved for real investments, new and expanded businesses, new jobs, and not just social services. And it's not just the African American community that demands our attention. Other communities of color face similar challenges, and in many more Sacramento neighborhoods than just Meadowview. 70% of the children in the Sacramento City Unified School District are poor enough to qualify for free breakfast and lunch. That says it all. Our youth deserve not only more weekend and after-school activities, but also clear pathways to high-wage jobs. Our historic commercial corridors have vision, passion, but few resources to realize their potential. We have this incredible energy and some new resources around art and culture and bringing back arts to our schools, but so little funding to make arts and culture a centerpiece of our neighborhood movement. Start with the basics. This impressive facility that Sam and Bonnie Pannell fought so hard to build is closed on Tuesdays and Sundays and only open until noon on Saturdays. Spending on youth programs was slashed during the recession and remains more than 25% below 2006 levels. Heroic nonprofit leaders have stepped in. Here, of course, in Meadowview, you met Jackie Rose. The Rose Family Creative Empowerment Center, led by Ms. Jackie, this year's Friedman Award winner, educates hundreds of children in after-school and summer programs in our public schools. It runs that drumline and choir. It helps struggling families of all ethnicities find housing and overcome tremendous obstacles. Many neighborhood kids, and even some of their parents, had never seen the ocean before going on a field trip to San Francisco with Ms. Jackie. As she likes to say, whatever someone else deserves at a high level, this community also deserves it. There are Ms. Jackies throughout our entire city, but they struggle to cobble together the resources to keep doing what she calls the heart work of serving the community. When I think of Meadowview, I think of Ms. Jackie and of hardworking families, but that is not the image of Meadowview that our society necessarily sees. A Google search produces results heavy on crime, including the headline for a TV story entitled "The Lost Boys of Meadowview." It must not be this way. As I said almost a year ago, when I launched our campaign for Measure U, great cities leave no one behind. Today, I renew our call to action for all of our Sacramento neighborhoods and all of our people. to you. Last November, 57% of Sacramento voters chose to add 1/2 cent to their sales tax. Though the voters passed a general tax, I campaigned clearly and energetically as your mayor to make the signature focus of these new resources transformational investments to change generational poverty. Some rolled their eyes. Many thought it would never pass. Just like homelessness, I do not pretend that one measure, or one mayor, or one city can fix all of society's ills. But there is an equal truism on the other side. If we do not insist on equity, if we do not put real resources where our beliefs and our values lie, then we will relegate more generations of people to lesser lives than they deserve, and we can't do that. You know where I stand as your mayor, and I am grateful for the strong backing from our city council and the voters. Fortunately, the economy is still booming. We will have revenue growth for at least the foreseeable future. We must continue to bolster our core city services and treat our employees with the dignity and the respect that they deserve. Let us be honest about last year's election. But for the rallying cry to invest in growing a modern, inclusive economy, the city undoubtedly would have sought to merely renew the old Measure U at 1/2 cent. Our obligation to follow through on what we campaign for is crystal clear to me. For at least the first 5 years, I call for the lion's share of the second 1/2 cent to Measure U to be invested directly in economic equity in our neighborhoods. Let us set aside $40 million a year for at least 5 years in our Economic Trust Fund. That's $200 million, and it will demonstrate clearly that this movement is not just a whim or a fancy. Our commitment is long overdue. Our commitment is real. Our commitment is right. Through our soon-to-be appointed Measure U Advisory Committee and the expert advice of a broad and diverse investment committee, the City Council will have the ability and the capacity to partner with the private sector, our other public sector partners, and most important with our community to boldly invest in all our Sacramento neighborhoods. No more young people's lives sacrificed to the old excuse, we just don't have the money. No more forgotten commercial corridors. No more lack of resources to address our affordable housing crisis. No more lack of capital to help start or grow neighborhood small businesses. No more wishing we could attract more Fortune 100 employers like Centene. The old days of wouldn't it be great are over in Sacramento. This $200 million plan will still leave $10 million a year from the new 1/2 cent, plus $50 million a year from the current 1/2 cent, plus all the revenue growth, plus the significant anticipated revenue from our emerging legal cannabis industry to both enhance core services and to maintain healthy reserves. Providing public safety, police and fire, and other core services is still the most important function of any city. But we can only enhance those core functions for the people if we are committed to building a real and a broad tax base. Building up all our neighborhoods is good for all of Sacramento. And we will find real ways outside of Measure U to maintain the momentum on broader citywide priorities. We have $40 million of new money to transform Sacramento's waterfront because of the efficient way we manage the convention center and community center theater expansions. Sacramento can, in fact, have it all. There is the state of our city as I see it. We gather in the middle of winter. The days are short. Spring feels like a long time away. We may have some difficult days ahead, but we have a choice. Sacramento's next days and months must be a tipping point, not a breaking point. Spring promises renewal and new hope. May Sacramento experience peace this spring and in all seasons. May we always show our love for one another. May we grow our fierce devotion for all our neighborhoods and all our people. And may we back it up with action that inspires our wonderful city and generations to come. Thank you very much. This is the beginning, and only the beginning, of a new and bold direction in our city. It's going to put $350,000 towards continuing these Friday night youth activities in our city.
We're the future, we're the next generation, so we have to, step up and make a change. This is important because, it's a safe space for people and it'll bring communities together.
I grew up in Sacramento my whole life, from this neighborhood, Oak Park. I love my community.
Sacramento it's a good place to be.
I've so far liked the 16 years I've been in this city.
It's like how my background makes me look a certain way. The background of Sacramento also makes it look a certain way.
I need more programs from the city.
It would be great to have more mentors in our community.
I feel like we need in our community to have more teen and children events.
More opportunities like this or more open gyms to keep kids out of trouble.
I feel like it should be more activities for girls in particular, because usually they only have basketball.
I would like to see more of special education services for autistic, Down syndrome.
If I wasn't here, I'd probably be out at home, watching TV.
What would I be doing on Friday night? I'd be in the house asleep.
I think Sacramento will be a lot better than it was 20 years ago. Hopefully it'll be a lot better than it was today.
It can be a place where everybody wants to come, they hear good things about it. They're like, oh, Sacramento, I want to go there,
I'm thinking of becoming a teacher when I grow up.
I like to be cook, chef, culinary.
Be a nurse at UC Davis.
So it's I don't know what I want to do, but I know I'm going to be successful.
I pledge to grow, I pledge to love, and I pledge to help.
I pledge to grow, I pledge to love, and I pledge to help.
I pledge to grow.
I pledge to love.
And I pledge to help Sacramento.
Thank you all. This concludes your State of the City. Thank you very much.